It's rough, but it's mine. That line would come later. But first came the frustration and the suit. Michael Langston didn't walk. He moved like he owned the pavement. At 42, he'd built Langston Enterprises from scratch, not inherited, not handed down, but carved from the granite of the tech world by sheer force of will. Tonight, though, that force was fraying at the edges. His eyes were bloodshot. His shirt collar was unbuttoned. And the $5,000 suit he wore didn't make him feel powerful, it made him feel trapped. He sat alone in the back seat of his Bentley as it rolled through the city's financial district. Neon signs blinked past the windows like warnings. His phone buzzed again. Another message from legal. Still no resolution. A $2.3 billion merger with Synergy Solutions, one of the biggest tech consolidations of the year, was about to collapse over language in a contract. Even his Ivy League lawyers couldn't untangle. The 200-page draft had grown more cryptic with every revision. Time was running out, and so was Michael's patience. "Where can I think?" he muttered, rubbing his temples. His driver, a quiet man named Alvin, spoke for the first time all night. "There's a place, Rosie's Diner. Been around forever. Quiet. Cheap. No cameras. You want space. That's it." Michael scoffed. A diner, really, but he wasn't hungry, he was desperate. Minutes later, the Bentley pulled up in front of a small building wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The neon roses flickered weakly in the window. Inside, a few late-night patrons nursed coffee and worn-out dreams. The place smelled like burnt bacon and nostalgia. Michael stepped in and instantly felt out of place. His polished shoes clicked too loudly on the worn tile. The air was thick with diner grease and the sound of an old Motown tune playing from a dusty jukebox. No one looked up. That, oddly, was a relief. He chose a booth in the far corner and pulled out the contract. Hundreds of annotations lined the margins, crossed out clauses, red scribbles, question marks and exclamation points battling for control. He read, but the words meant nothing. Indemnification, fiduciary, escrow. It all blurred into white noise. His jaw clenched. His pen stabbed the paper again and again. His empire was on the edge, and no one seemed to have answers. Until someone brought him water. A glass of water. That's all it was. But in the chaos of Michael's thoughts, the gesture sliced through like a signal flare. He didn't look up at first. "I didn't order anything," he muttered, still hunched over the contract. "I know," came a calm voice. "You just looked like you needed it." Michael finally glanced up and locked eyes with her. She wasn't wearing a name tag, but everything else about her said Waitress. Black apron, coffee-stained sneakers, messy bun with a pen tucked behind her ear. But there was something else, an alertness in her green eyes that didn't match the slow rhythm of the diner. "Rough night?" she asked, her tone light, not intrusive. Michael raised an eyebrow. "You moonlight as a therapist now," Grace smiled. "Not flirty, just steady." "Nah, just good at reading people. 3 years behind this counter teaches you a lot." Michael gave a half snort. "You don't say." She nodded at the papers scattered before him. "Legal mess, something like that. You look like someone trying to wrestle a tiger with a soup spoon." That made him chuckle barely. Her eyes scanned the cluttered contract. She didn't touch it, just observed. Sometimes, talking it out helps, even if you're just yelling at the air. Michael leaned back, weary. Even if the air talks back, Grace shrugged. Depends on the diner. He looked at her again, this time a bit longer. She didn't fidget, didn't flatter, just stood there, waiting, as if she already knew he'd eventually talk. Michael hesitated, then tapped the top page. It's a merger contract, $2 billion worth of red tape, and I'm the one supposed to make sense of it. You're Michael Langston, she said simply, not impressed, just stating a fact. That caught him off guard. You recognize me, you're on the cover of Tech Today twice a year, Grace said, pouring him a refill without asking. It's hard not to. He let out a bitter laugh. So, you read tech magazines while pouring coffee. Sometimes I solve logic puzzles in my head while mopping the floor. Michael blinked. Was she serious? She set the coffee pot down. I'm not trying to impress you. You just looked like you were drowning. And I've read enough to know the difference between someone flailing and someone worth saving. He didn't know what to say to that. Grace turned to walk away, then paused. If it's too complicated, try explaining it out loud. Sometimes things make more sense that way. Michael, maybe out of fatigue, maybe curiosity, asked, You think you could understand any of this? She turned back slowly. Try me. He smirked. What? You've got a law degree hiding under that apron. Grace's smile didn't move, but her voice lost its softness. No, just common sense and ears that work. Michael pushed the top page across the table, more as a joke than a challenge. Fine. Enlighten me. He expected her to skim a line, laugh awkwardly, and back off. She didn't. She sat down across from him and started to read. Grace flipped through the first few pages without saying a word. Her fingers moved with surprising care, not skimming, but scanning, like someone solving a complex equation rather than browsing a menu. Michael crossed his arms, watching her with mild amusement. You don't have to actually try. You know, I was being sarcastic. Grace didn't respond. She pulled a notepad from her apron and began writing, small, neat handwriting, bullet points. Michael frowned. After a few minutes, she looked up. All right, she said calmly. This section here, indemnification protocols. It's legal speak for figuring out who takes the hit if something blows up after the deal closes. Michael narrowed his eyes. Okay, let's say you buy a used car. Grace continued, her tone even, and the engine fails the next day. This clause decides whether it's your problem or the seller's. Your draft says Synergy wants you to take responsibility for any of their tech failures once the merger is final. Michael blinked. That was actually accurate. He leaned forward slightly. That's not bad. Grace nodded. Thanks. She flipped a few more pages. Now, escrow stipulations. This one's a classic trust issue. Basically, they want $500 million set aside, locked up in a neutral account. Neither party can touch it until certain conditions are met. Yeah, I know what escrow is, Michael said, a little defensive. Grace held up her hand. Right. Sorry. Just laying it out. But here's the thing, they're asking for full release after performance milestones. No contingencias. That's risky for you. What if their software doesn't meet the benchmarks? Michael scratched his chin. She wasn't just explaining, she was reading between the lines. And this clause here, she continued, pointing to a paragraph mid-page. This one says, Synergy can walk away if Langston's stock dips below 11% in a rolling 30-day average. That's a kill switch. Quiet, but lethal. Michael sat back, stunned. His own legal team hadn't flagged that. "You caught that?" he asked, not bothering to hide his surprise. Grace looked him in the eye. "Yeah, it stuck out. It's like signing a lease that lets the landlord kick you out if it rains too many days in a row." He stared at her, the mockery gone from his face. For the first time in hours, Michael Langston was listening. Grace went on, breaking down clause after clause, with the clarity of someone who understood systems, not just words. She didn't speak like a lawyer, she spoke like a teacher. Analogies, examples, plain language. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was solving the problem. And Michael knew brilliance when he saw it, even if it was wearing sneakers and a coffee-stained apron. Michael sat in stunned silence as Grace continued dissecting the contract clause by clause, page by page. She wasn't bluffing. She was sharp, methodical, unshaken. "This arbitration clause is tilted in their favor," she said, underlining with her pen. "If any disputes arise, they want it resolved in their home state. That's a problem. Their courts are notoriously slow and friendly to corporations." Michael leaned back, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Okay," he said slowly. "You're not just good at this. You're scary good." Grace chuckled. "It's just logic. Patterns. Words dressed in suits." "You ever work in law?" he asked. She shook her head. "Nope. Never even set foot in a law firm. Finance. Not unless you count balancing tips and overdue rent." "Then how the hell do you know all this?" Grace hesitated, her hand stilled on the notepad. "I was a computer science major," she said at last. "At NYU." Michael blinked. "That's not a small deal." "What happened?" "My mom got sick. Cancer. Aggressive." Her voice softened. "I dropped out to take care of her and my little brother. No time. No money. So, I picked up shifts here." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." Grace smiled, but it was laced with fatigue. "Don't be. It's life. And I still learn. Every day. I borrow textbooks from the library. Watch MIT lectures on YouTube. I practice coding on my phone during slow shifts." Michael stared at her, no longer amused, now just impressed. "You still code, yeah? Keeps my mind sharp. Anything you've built?" She hesitated, then reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. "There's this app I've been working on. Just a prototype." She tapped a few times and turned the screen to him. It was a clean, minimalist interface, intuitive, fluid, real-time messaging across platforms. She explained. "Encrypted. Works on low bandwidth. It's built for field teams, emergency workers, people in motion." Michael blinked. He knew that interface. Not exactly, but enough to feel his stomach twist. His R&D team had been stuck on that same challenge for 6 months. "This," he whispered, "this is really good." Grace looked almost apologetic. "It's rough, but it's mine." And in that moment, something shifted in the air. Michael Langston, tech titan. Boardroom bruiser, was left speechless by a waitress with no degree, no funding, and no backing. Just talent, and grit, and a mind the world had overlooked. Michael stared at the screen a little longer. The more he tapped around, the more stunned he became. Smooth transitions, intelligent architecture, and underneath it all, raw potential, This could be huge, he murmured. Grace shrugged, still unsure. Maybe. Or maybe it's just another waitress's dream that never leaves the notebook. Michael looked up sharply. You're wrong. She raised an eyebrow. About what? About no one. Taking you seriously. He leaned forward. I would. Grace laughed under her breath. You, the guy who called me sweetheart and told me to stick to coffee. Michael winced. Fair point. I was an ass. She smirked. No argument there. He cleared his throat. Straightened. But I'm not stupid. You've got something. Something real. Grace, let me help you build this. I've got funding, engineers, offices, connections. She looked at him carefully. Why now? Because you just saved my deal. He said honestly, you saw things my entire legal team missed. And because I know talent when I see it, I built my empire on spotting it. I almost missed you. Grace didn't respond right away. She was quiet for a moment, then stood up, taking back her phone. Michael blinked. Wait, that's it. She gave a small shrug. Look, I've had people make offers before, usually after a few beers and a big tip, but they always disappear the next day. I'm not them. No, you're not, she admitted. You're sharper, but you still don't know me. I want to. Why, she asked simply. Because I'm smart. Because I fixed your paper mess that's not knowing me. Michael. He fell silent. Grace took a breath. If I ever partner with someone, it's going to be on my terms. I don't want to be the face of someone else's product. I want to build it right. From the ground up, and stay true to what it was meant to be. Michael studied her, not just the calm in her voice, but the fire behind it. She wasn't just talented. She had conviction. Then let's build it on your terms, he said finally. Grace tilted her head. You're willing to be challenged by someone in a coffee-stained apron, he smiled. I've been out-negotiated by board members in $10. Oh, 0 suits. You're scarier than all of them. She cracked a grin, then nodded once. Then maybe we'll talk. The diner was quiet again. The jukebox played something soft and slow. And between two people from two very different worlds, something rare had just begun. Respect. The next morning, Michael Langston sat in his glass-walled office, staring at the skyline, but seeing only the booth at Rosie's. The contract lay on his desk. But for once, it didn't feel like the most important thing in the room. He had used Grace's insights, and they worked. By mid-morning, he renegotiated the risk clauses, revised the escrow language, and restructured the kill switch conditions. His legal team was baffled by how suddenly it all clicked. But he knew why. He couldn't get her voice out of his head. It's like buying a car, and then the engine dies. They're asking for trust, but without accountability. If it rains 3 days in a row, they kick you out. She'd taken the incomprehensible and made it human. Michael picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, then stopped. He didn't have her number. She hadn't given it, and he hadn't asked. He wasn't sure she would have, even if he had, because Grace wasn't impressed by power, or money, or titles. She respected clarity, effort, purpose. That shook him more than he cared to admit. Later that day, the synergy deal closed, and thanks to Grace, it closed on Langston's terms. Shareholders celebrated. Analysts predicted a market surge. Internally, it was a win, but Michael felt unfinished. He didn't want just the deal. He wanted to build something real. That night, he returned to Rosie's. No contract in hand. No pressure. Just a quiet offer and a seat across from a woman who had unknowingly rewritten the trajectory of his company and maybe even his life. She saw him walk in and raised an eyebrow. Didn't think you were the type to eat at the same place twice. He smiled. Turns out I like the coffee. She smirked. It's terrible. I'm not here for the coffee. He sat down. This time, no suit, no briefcase, just intention. I meant what I said. He told her, not a pitch, a partnership. You lead the build. I back you up. You stay true to your vision. And I give you the space and resources to make it real. Grace studied him, arms crossed. You still don't know me. Then let me earn it. There was a long pause. Then, finally, she slid into the seat across from him. Okay, but I keep working here. Michael blinked. You want to keep waitressing until we launch? She said, this place keeps me grounded. And you're not my boss. We build this together or not at all. Michael smiled genuinely. Deal. And in that moment, it wasn't a handshake that sealed the future. It was mutual respect, and two minds vastly different, but finally aligned. 3 days later, Grace walked into Langston Enterprises for the first time, not as an intern, not as someone delivering lunch, but as the lead architect of a new division. No one said it out loud, but the looks said enough. A waitress, leading development. Some of the engineers stared. Others just nodded politely and got back to their keyboards. Michael could see it, the skepticism hanging in the air like fog. Grace noticed too, but she didn't flinch. She wore jeans and a plain t-shirt under a blazer Michael had arranged for her. But she walked like she belonged, laptop under one arm, coffee in the other. Eyes scanning the glass corridors of the tech giant she once only saw in magazines. Michael introduced her to the team, a dozen developers, UX designers, a systems analyst, and 2 project managers. This is Grace Harper, he said. She's leading the prototype for ConnectFear. Full creative control. You report to her. There was a pause. One of the developers, Mark, mid-30s, Ivy League. Skeptical eyes raised a brow. Wait. The messaging platform, the encrypted cross-platform comms app. Yes, Michael said. And she's in charge. Michael didn't blink. She built the original prototype. It's her vision. Grace met Mark's stare head-on. If you've got concerns, bring them to me. I don't do ego. I do execution. Mark didn't reply, but he didn't challenge her again. Over the next few weeks, Grace proved she was more than worthy of the title. She didn't bark orders. She asked questions, smart ones. She listened. She reviewed lines of code until 3:00 a.m., sometimes falling asleep on the office couch with a laptop still open on her chest. She didn't have a CS degree, but when she spoke, people leaned in, because Grace wasn't just building an app. She was building trust. And slowly, the team responded. Mark began asking her advice on architecture. The designers started looping her in before mock-ups were finalized. Even the veteran project manager, Helena, began defending her in exec meetings. Michael watched it all from a distance. He didn't interfere. He didn't need to. Grace was doing what even he hadn't expected, turning skeptics into believers. 6 months passed. 6 months of debugging, testing, redesigning of 300 AM, coding marathons, of coffee-stained whiteboards and last-minute breakthroughs. The office fridge became home to energy drinks. Sleep was traded for progress. And finally, ConnectFear was ready. A sleek, secure, real-time communication platform designed for chaotic environments, emergency workers, remote teams, field agents. It wasn't just fast, it was reliable, intuitive, and built with the kind of empathy that only someone like Grace could have imagined. Michael stood in the Langston Auditorium on launch day, watching hundreds of journalists, investors, and employees file in. His name was on the banners, the screens, the program notes. But this time, he wasn't the star. He turned to Grace, who stood beside him backstage, visibly nervous. "You built this," he said. "Take the stage. It's yours." She shook her head. "No, this was everyone. I'll speak later." "Maybe." After the dust settles, he nodded, not pressing her. Grace had never been one for spotlight. Her power came from clarity, not applause. Michael gave the keynote, but halfway through, he did something unexpected. He paused, stepped aside, and introduced the mind that made this possible. When Grace walked out, the room didn't erupt into cheers. It went silent. The kind of silence people give when they realize they've underestimated someone. She stood there, steady, unapologetic, and delivered a short, brilliant demo that left even the toughest skeptics nodding. No flair, no buzzwords, just truth, functionality, and vision. After the launch, ConnectFear trended globally. Michael's stock soared, but something more important happened behind the scenes. Grace, without telling anyone, had set aside 15% of her equity shares into a fund, a scholarship for working-class coders. People like her, people who'd been overlooked. No press release, no announcement, just a quiet form on a website that read, "For those who build at 200 AM. Between shifts, between bills, you matter. Here's your chance." Michael found out later, and when he did, he didn't say anything. He just smiled, because that was Grace. Changing the world, one uncelebrated act at a time. After the launch, Langston Enterprises looked the same from the outside: glass towers, smart halls, quiet confidence. But inside, something had changed. Michael called a meeting with HR, legal, and all department heads. "I want new hiring protocols," he said, effective immediately. They blinked. "Sir, we're expanding our recruitment funnel." Michael continued. "Community colleges, online boot camps, night school students, self-taught coders, single parent, veterans. A pause. Resumes won't be our first filter anymore. We'll use practical skill tests, real problem-solving scenarios. I don't care if they don't have a LinkedIn. If they can think, we want them." There was hesitation, even pushback, but Michael held his ground. He shared Grace's story, not all the personal details, but just enough to show them that brilliance doesn't always wear a suit or hold a degree. She changed the direction of this company. He said, "Without her, ConnectFear wouldn't exist, and we would have signed a contract that cost us everything." Silence, then slow nods, and one by one, departments began revisiting how they hired Internships were opened to those without college enrollment. Application portals were redesigned. Interview panels were trained to look past polish and find potential. It wasn't charity. It was good business. Because Grace had proven something that should have been obvious all along. Talent lives everywhere, not just in ivy-covered buildings or glossy resumes. And as new hires came in, a teenage coder from a farm town, a former mechanic who taught himself Python, a refugee with a bootstrapped portfolio, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Because what Grace gave him wasn't just a product or a second chance. She gave him a lens to see the invisible, to hear the unheard, and to believe again in something bigger than margins and market share. 1 year later, Rosie's was buzzing. The neon sign had been fixed. The jukebox played a little louder. Someone had finally replaced the cracked sugar jars. It was still the same old diner, but tonight it was full, a quiet celebration in progress. ConnectFear had just released its biggest update, yet multilingual real-time AI messaging, bridging teams across language barriers in disaster zones and remote industries. And at a booth in the back, near the window, Michael Langston sat. No suit, no entourage, just a mug of coffee, a slice of pie, and a look of quiet reflection. Grace slid into the seat across from him. No apron this time. Tonight, she wore a soft blazer and jeans. Her laptop still tucked under one arm, but her posture confident, relaxed, carried the weight of a founder, not an employee. Michael raised his mug. To underestimating people. Grace tapped her cup against his, to proving them wrong. They smiled, the easy kind of smile born from late nights and war rooms and hard conversations that lead to real respect. I never thanked you, Michael said. For what? For showing up. For not backing down. For being right. Grace smirked. You don't have to thank me. I do, he said, more quietly now, because you didn't just save a deal, you reminded me what I used to believe in. When I started this company, I believed in outliers, in hustle, in the misfits who saw things differently. I forgot that for a while. Grace looked out the window. We all forget sometimes. And now, she said, we hire them. They sat in silence for a moment, watching a teenager refill napkin holders at the counter, a kid from the local coding boot camp Grace had funded. Michael noticed him. That one, yours first scholarship class. She said, he writes better Python than I did at 25. Michael smiled. Good. The world could use more of you. Grace leaned back. The world already has more of me. They just need to be seen. Outside, the city lights blurred with possibility. Inside, two people, once strangers, divided by assumption, now shared something far greater than business. Mutual belief. The kind that builds companies. The kind that rewrites destinies. And in a world driven by titles and credentials, their story whispered a quieter truth. Brilliance doesn't need a pedigree. It just needs a chance. Sometimes, the most powerful minds don't sit in boardrooms. They sit behind counters. They serve coffee at 2:00 a.m. They build quietly in the shadows, waiting for the world to stop overlooking them. Grace didn't need permission to be brilliant. She just needed someone to listen. And Michael, he didn't just find a new app. He found a new way to lead through humility, respect, and the courage to see beyond the resume. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that brilliance comes in all forms, Tell us in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated? Or maybe you gave someone a chance and they changed everything? We'd love to hear your story. And if you believe more stories like this deserve to be told, hit that like button. Subscribe for more true, emotional narratives. And share this video with someone who might need a little reminder that genius wears many faces. And sometimes it serves you coffee before changing the world.